Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Black Knights. In the 13th century, legends began to spread across Europe of a mysterious order of Black Knights. Nobody knows where exactly these stories came from, but suddenly Black Knights were a staple in local folklore. These knights supposedly carried out good deeds, protected cities from corrupt kings, and fought against evil. Stories about Black Knights became so ingrained in society that the church banned texts talking about them during the Middle Ages. It's hard to say who the first legendary Black Knight was, but one of the first was definitely Ashur the King Killer. According to legend, Ashur was an older knight who had a nasty reputation of slaying kings, nobles, and beating other knights in sword fights. In the 13th century, a king ordered Ashur to his court and gave the order to kill his nemesis. Ashur agreed to kill the other king, and then he ended up on a bit of an adventure involving a priest in a dungeon, a demon, an angel, and a mysterious entity known as the Anonymous One. The story ends with Ashur being granted immortality for his stout heart and good deeds. And while there is a chance this person never existed, his story inspired hundreds of copies. It got to the point medieval people really believed there were Black Knights riding around everywhere. Number 9. The Philosopher's Stone. If you're familiar with the Philosopher's Stone, it's probably because of a certain book about young wizards. But the Philosopher's Stone was a very real legend in the Middle Ages. All the way until the 17th century, alchemists, sorcerers, and medieval maniacs tried desperately to get their hands on it. According to the legends, the Philosopher's Stone had the power to turn boring metals like zinc or copper into gold. It was also believed the Philosopher's Stone could cure any illness, give immortality, and bestow a person with eternal youth. But just what in the world was the Philosopher's Stone? Contrary to popular belief, it was not a physical stone. It was believed to be a mineral, some kind of substance that could be put into elixirs and used in alchemical reactions. Early scientists truly thought there was a special mineral somewhere that would give them ultimate power. Some of the world's greatest minds even went searching for the magical stone. Roger Boyle and Isaac Newton believed in it, and Nicholas Flamel even claimed that he used the Philosopher's Stone to transform lead into gold. But as far as modern science is concerned, the Philosopher's Stone has never existed. Do you think something like this could actually exist? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And now for number 8. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Lara Ashley Davis and Ubaldo Myers. Thanks so much for watching and supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Number 8. The Legend of Magonia. People used to believe in a mysterious cloud realm hovering above the physical Earth. This realm in the sky, an actual civilization in the clouds, was called Magonia. But all we really know about this mysterious place comes from a Spanish-born priest who wrote down its details 1,200 years ago. His name is Agobard of Leon, and he was a Carolingian bishop in the early 800s. He was also the author of many treatises covering subject matter like Spanish adoptionism, Jewish religious practices, and political controversies of his day. He was quite the intellectual. Among all these seemingly ordinary writings, Agobard wrote about a hidden cloud realm in the sky and something he called weather magic. It's a pretty big jump to go from politics to magic, but this was the 9th century. Agobard was openly against all pagan practices. When he wrote his treatise against weather magic and the mysterious stormland of Magonia, he did so to denounce it. He mentioned a popular belief from sailors and pirates who came down from the realm in the sky to pillage and plunder. Apparently, if Agobard's complaining is to be believed, people around him were talking about how the cloud people of Magonia were creating storms that ruined crops with their sky magic. And then they would come down and steal all their stuff. This is a really weird medieval mystery because we don't have any other records of Magonia. This singular bishop appears to be the only one who ever wrote anything about it. Yet according to his own words, people he knew believed in a realm in the clouds, and they even had pirates who came down in flying ships. Have you heard of this mysterious cloud realm before? Let me know in the comments. Number 7. The Werewolf Trials. Long before America had an obsession with witch hunts, Europe was in the throes of their own werewolf hysteria. In Germany in 1589, executioners strapped a man named Peter Stump to a big wooden wheel, removed pieces of his skin with hot pincers, and then took off his head. His head was then put on a spike to warn locals not to associate themselves with the devil. Peter's only crime was being weird, but back then anything weird or different was satanic and deserved to be punished. Everyone thought he was a werewolf, but he was hardly the only one who was accused of turning into a werewolf at night and stalking the countryside. Werewolf trials were popular in Europe for about 300 years. They continued until the 17th century, which strangely enough was when folks got on the witch hunt bandwagon. Right when werewolf trials stopped, witchcraft trials began. Almost anyone could be accused of turning into a werewolf. It was mostly beggars, hermits, newly arrived immigrants from parts unknown, and others who didn't quite fit into society. If you acted unusual, you could find yourself being flayed alive. Number 6. The Strangeness of Jane Shore. Elizabeth Jane Shore is still famous centuries after her death for being one of the mistresses of King Edward IV of England. She remained famous when most of his other mistresses were lost to obscurity because of her charm, influence, and outrageous behavior. She captivated the people, was one of the king's favorite lovers, and she even used her influence to protect those King Edward would have otherwise destroyed. After Edward's death, things got nasty. Elizabeth Jane Shore was accused by Richard III of being a harlot. As punishment for her lewdness, she was made to strip down to her underwear and walk through the streets of London. She had to do history's most famous walk of shame. Elizabeth was born in London in 1445 as the daughter of a wealthy merchant. From birth, Elizabeth was part of high society. She was also exceptionally brilliant. At 15, she was married to a man named William Shore. A few years later, in 1476, she was given an annulment by Pope Sixtus IV because her husband was impotent and couldn't perform his marital duties. Right from the start, Elizabeth had great aspirations and could not be held back in life. Her husband just didn't cut it. These aspirations and her unyielding determination for something greater brought Elizabeth in contact with the king. She remained by his side until 1483 when he died. She then tried to stay in the English court by quickly becoming the mistress of Thomas Grey, who was the son of Edward IV's true queen with her previous husband. Elizabeth also had another lover in court, something like a backup guy who would keep her safe from harm. But none of that mattered when Richard III decided he had it out for her. Richard had her backup lover executed and even accused Elizabeth of witchcraft. Her relatives were murdered and she was forced to walk through London in her underpants. Her power was just too much, and the fact that she'd been loyal to the previous king made her an enemy of the state. Elizabeth Jane Shore died many years later in obscurity at the age of 82. Number 5. The Eruption of Mount Etna. On March 8, 1669, the most volatile active volcano in the world erupted on the island of Sicily. It's called Mount Etna, and 4 centuries ago, its explosion was one of the biggest volcanic events in modern human history. 20,000 people were killed, and thousands more were left homeless. Most people in the shadow of the mountain fled to escape being burned alive by lava, but there were a few who stayed and tried to fight the volcano. The first record we have of Mount Etna erupting comes from 475 BC. It's believed to be the most active volcano in Europe. It erupted in 1169 as well, killing about 15,000 people in Sicily. Despite the danger the mountain obviously presents, villages re-emerged and people moved back in. Finally, in 1669, the volcano did it again. When it began to belch gas, noxious fumes, and fire, 3,000 people who were living on the slopes of the mountain died immediately. There were about 20,000 people living in the nearby city of Catania, and instead of leaving, they sent a team of 50 men to divert the approaching lava flow. These men fought the lava with iron rods and shovels, trying to redirect the flow like they might redirect a flooding river. It worked surprisingly well, but not that well. People tried to divert the lava for weeks, while the people of Catania patiently waited. Then, at last, the lava flowed into the medieval city and everyone was killed because nobody bothered to evacuate. Would you ever live near an active volcano? Let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Number 4. The rat catcher. One of the most despicable jobs you could get in medieval times was to run around chasing rats. Cities in the Middle Ages were so disgusting they were infested with vermin. There were so many rats and disease-spreading animals in Europe that it became a lucrative business to exterminate them. Poor people who had no other opportunities in life would chase rats through the sewers so that they could make a few extra bucks. The profession of catching rats started with the onset of the Black Death in the 1300s and reached its peak in Victorian England during the 19th century. Rat catchers began at the very bottom of society, trudging through muck and slime and filth to catch as many rats as they could. But they eventually became modern exterminators. Lowly rat catchers evolved to become real exterminators, not just sewer-dwelling rat grabbers. But things in the rat world weren't always as simple as they might seem. People weren't really crawling on their hands and knees through sewer pipes to kill rats. They had dogs and ferrets that would do it for them. Rat catchers became so good at exterminating vermin that they would even breed rats and release them so they could make more money. Rat catchers also started breeding what they called fancy rats. These were pets sold to rich people in London, increasing their pay even more. What started as a necessity in the Middle Ages became a huge business. In 1901, there was even the National Mouse Club, a sort of fan club for fancy rats. Number 3. The Forgotten Killer. Du Chanatir was one of the earliest serial killers in recorded history. He also happened to be the king of Yemen for almost 30 years. He took the throne around 490 AD and immediately started his murder spree. Ancient historical records say he lured young boys, mostly the sons of nobles and people in the royal family, to his home with the promise of anything from food to money. He then tortured them before throwing them naked out of the window of his own house. He was one of the most outrageous royal serial killers because he didn't even try to hide what he was doing. The king only stopped when someone got so angry that they went up to his building and assassinated him. After he was killed, Du Chanatir's head was displayed for everyone to see in the palace window. It's still unclear how such a maniac made it on the throne, or why he lasted 27 years before someone finally got rid of him. Number 2. The Book of Beasts. Reading material in the medieval period was not exactly as widespread or diverse as it is today. During the Middle Ages in Europe, you couldn't just walk into a convenience store and grab a book off the shelf. They didn't have a wall section of books at your local donkey cart station. What they did have was a very select few books that were passed around and shared. Most of the books were religious in nature, but one of them was more exciting than any other. Forget about the Bible. People in the medieval world wanted their own copy of the Bestiary. The Bestiary was by far one of the most popular illustrated texts in Europe. From between 500 and 1500, the Bestiary was almost more popular than the Bible, although it still had its ties to the good book. Medieval Christians believed all the creatures they saw in the Bestiary were manifestations of God. The book didn't just showcase incredible animals from across the world that most medieval peasants would never see, but it also gave them each a special religious meaning. The Bestiary was the earliest version of the Nature Channel. This would have been the one and only chance people had of looking at animals from faraway lands. People would have been gobsmacked by pictures of giraffes, elephants, weird birds, monkeys, and all kinds of other creatures. This was a major source of entertainment, and it was all because of the beautiful visuals inside the book. The Bestiary even became the basis for natural history as a science. Number 1. Unicorn Horn. The Bestiary book showed a lot of real animals and some that didn't quite exist. For example, the unicorn. The unicorn was one of the most favorite animals of the Middle Ages, even though there is no evidence it ever existed. But just like how people might believe whatever they see on the internet today, most medieval people believed the animals in their bestiaries were real. And that brings us to King Henry and his fascination with the mythical unicorn. Long before the Middle Ages, people believed certain animals, objects, and ingredients had magical properties. The rarer the creature, the more valuable their hide, horn, or whatever body parts they had that looked magical. No animal was believed to be more magical than the unicorn. It likely all started with the Vikings 1,000 years ago. Vikings frequently found narwhal tusks washed on the beach and sold them as magical unicorn horns. This undoubtedly started a trend in which the most powerful European rulers tried desperately to get their hands on one of these legendary horns. In 1533, King Francis I of France was given a horn coated in gold from Pope Clement VII. Philip II of Spain supposedly had 12 staffs made from unicorn horn, and in the 1600s, Christian V of Denmark sat on a throne made entirely of unicorn horns. Even the seemingly rational Queen Elizabeth I of England once purchased a spiral unicorn horn for £10,000. Historical expert Eleanor Herman says Queen Elizabeth drank from a unicorn horn cup. The queen believed that if anyone tried to poison her, the unicorn horn would explode and save her life. Keep in mind that £10,000 back in the day would be equal to £1.3 million now. For rich, wealthy royals, unicorn horns were definitely real. Thanks for watching. What do you think is the craziest thing medieval people believed in? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!